Welcome to Reframe Your Mindset for Success. With me today, I've got Don Schmincke. How are you, Don?
I am great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. And what have you been up to this week?
Trying to get my act together before I get on a plane again.
Okay, where have you just come back from?
Because I usually travel a lot. I mean, I've been in Chicago, LA. I'm back here on the East Coast, heading up to Philly in about an hour. And then I think I'm going to Monterey early next week. So be there. Yeah.
And what type of work have you been doing this week?
Mainly, speeches, but I've been upgrading our social media and web stuff and getting my, I got some online executive education courses that I started filming here in the studio, which is an old cigar room that I converted during COVID.
Yeah.
So COVID forced me to be a film producer.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So obviously you've had a really hectic and busy week. Now, as you know, I always start the podcast with your story. So really, it's over to you in as many words as you want to tell it. And obviously, I'll have some questions as we go.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no problem. How I got here in this research area for leadership was not predicted because I guess my story was more academic because I was at MIT studying planetary physics and doing some work in AI and biomedical engineering and just a lot of different science and engineering areas. And I thought that I was going to end up being more in medical research, but I went to Johns Hopkins. Oh boy, I can't believe I didn't turn that off. I went to Johns Hopkins and started my graduate work there. And that is where and by the way, I'm going to repeat that because I don't know if you're editing for the phone.
It's okay if you want to repeat it. Okay. Yeah, I can do.
Yeah. Okay, just I always like to be accommodating. But yeah, so I left MIT, went to Hopkins, and started getting fascinated by human grouping behaviors, and that's where I really got focused on how humans organize. Ran into a lot of people in the MBA programs.
Yeah.
That were frustrated with management theory. And so they asked me to, because of my background, could this be biological? And it was a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And so I began using anthropology and evolutionary psychology and genetics and, all those things to try to understand why the failure rate of management theory was so high, and why so many CEOs were critical of consultants and why they were, a lot of employees were jaded by the next, organizational change program. And Here we go again. And the next best-selling book. And I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that there might be common patterns. And so that's what got me into this. And then Oxford University gave me a really interesting possibility of taking an ancient management training program and republishing it. So I had copyright now access for a manuscript they had. Yeah. And it was samurai 700 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
So that was great. Yeah.
And I've seen, the number of books that you published, and one of those, isn't it? It's like the Code of the Samurai and leadership lessons from it. Yeah.
Yeah. The Code of the Executive was based on this manuscript where I thought, wow, executives today can use the same techniques that are so controversial. But when we started applying them in executive teams, it was like breakthrough. Wow. So now we do a lot of this work in companies, and I train about 700 CEOs every year in workshops. And it's been great. We've been in 100 industries, helping CEOs to just increase the performance of their companies and their sales dramatically using these techniques. So it started there. It started with the samurai.
Yeah. And has it been, because obviously there's been an awful lot of change in the world of recent, with the pandemic and lockdown and this, I guess what a lot of people have experienced is virtual fatigue. And I guess CEOs, the work's been cut out, hasn't it? Because normally it would be anyway. So have you noticed any difference in the way people have worked? And
yeah, dramatically. We used to do and I still do this today. I do maybe 70 or 80 speeches. I've done about 2,000 speeches on this topic, and I use it as an opportunity for research. And I always ask, like, how much does dysfunctional behavior impact your organization's performance?
Yeah.
And I get ranges of like 20 to 80%, but it was average around 50. Something happened during COVID. It dropped to 33%. So in other words, when people were looking at wasted time and gossip and backbiting and silo behavior and, selfish, egotistical, infighting and all that stuff, it dropped to 33%. I couldn't figure out why. And then it became obvious it's because the humans were not grouped together as much. They were working remotely, and it dropped, and so I still do that test today, and I'm like, hey, the warning is this: the humans are coming back.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm seeing the curve migrate back to the original 50% average.
Oh, really, really. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you'd like to think that because of the pandemic and lockdown, that the people are being a lot more kinder these days, but it might not always be the case.
Yeah. And to give us new questions and new observations about how do we lead, how do we organize, how do we, how do we increase sales and retain talent? Because the other area that has happened is these talent wars. And I've always even asked to give a few speeches just on that, because people are losing people.
Yeah.
Because before it was more of a geographic barrier. Like somebody in California is not going to steal from somebody from New York City.
Yeah.
But now they can.
They can, because the virtual. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's raised the bar, and I see a lot of CEOs struggling with that.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time in various industries helping them fix that, and like what's missing and how to. So finding and retaining talent is a big deal. COVID has just impacted industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I found as well going into organizations is that generally organizations and their leaders a lot of the time can be a condition of the organization. And what I mean by that is just the organizational conditioning means that if you've been there after a certain amount of time, you tend to act in a certain way. And that's why it's so important to bring that fresh talent in, those fresh viewpoints into the organization. Because they bring in the different ways of doing things at the end of the day, that cognitive diversity as well.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
So have you in your research into group collaboration? Have you done much traveling part of that?
Oh, you mean well, before COVID, a lot. I mean, obviously, because I was in 2 or 3 cities a week, and now I'm starting to do that again since last March. But I would do an expedition or some global excursion once or twice a year, so I could study remote regions, ancient civilizations, tribes in various segments. So I can, because for me, I want to learn about how humans are biologically driven from a leadership perspective. How much of leadership is biological? Because that's the stuff. If we can tap into that, we have now broken through the high failure rate of management theory, and then we're able to grow a company 2 to 3 times, in some cases 10 times within a few years. So I like that because as a scientist, I like to see companies grow faster than any time in the past, because this approach is just different, and they love it. I mean, the CEOs I have a following of thousands of CEOs following me around because that's really enjoy it.
That is fantastic. I mean, I did research recently into leadership of the hunter-gatherers, and the hunter-gatherers, from my understanding, used more of a hive process of leadership, which was whoever had the right ability or skill, they would defer leadership to them. And you look at it in this day and age and you think, well, that would be brilliant, wouldn't it? Is that when it comes to collaboration, we actually then defer leadership to the person who's the most capable. So I don't know if that links into your biological research at all.
Yeah. About 30 or 40 years ago, we started implementing organic structures in organizations. Not everybody needs it, but in those areas that needed higher innovation,
Right.
higher adaptability, higher acceleration of execution, things like that. It was organics became better. And in those structures, there are the pod or the team that you're part of, you can have, rotating leadership based exactly on that.
Yeah.
So about 30 or 40 years ago, I'm losing track now, we were like one of our companies was a Fortune 100 firm, and they won the Team of the Year award for that. And that's what happened,
Yeah.
So it is possible. I think it's a great insight you've got there. And yeah, we've seen it work now for many decades. So yeah, it can work today.
Brilliant, brilliant. So as you know, the podcast is about mindset and reframing your mindset. So, based on what you've been doing in your life, in your career, why has mindset been so important to you?
I think because it defines how we see reality. And so if we're solving problems or making decisions and we have the wrong mindset, then that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely, definitely. So how would you describe your mindset then?
My mindset is to continually learn and teach. So I will focus my mindset on anything that can expand my capacity to learn and to teach. By teaching is publishing, giving speeches at corporate events, just sharing this in some way, and more recently, online delivery of education. And so my mindset is just really around helping evolve civilization at some small level in the area of leadership.
Wow.
And so I'm always inquiring into that.
Yeah. I mean that for me is that you're tapping into a mindset of meaning and purpose there, because, you're looking to improve human civilization. That in itself is a big purpose to have. When you're actually giving talks, because a lot of people will be listening in and thinking, not everybody can stand on stage, not everybody can give the type of talks or speeches that you do. Do you ever get nervous, or do you get yourself into the right mindset? Is that how it works for you, or is it just easy to give a talk?
I think the first 25 speeches, it's always you're trying to figure out and it depends on the audience too. What's my target audience? What's the best way to frame the conversation? And then I hired coaches, I hired advisors, I had I get videotaped and critiqued, because when I became an author, I had to be on stage.
Yeah.
And I joined the National Speakers Association, which is a fabulous forum to support all that. So as I evolved, now we're going back far too long, like back in the 90s, I started finding, the zone that I needed to be in. And now I just show up and give a speech. And it's exciting to me because, I'm teaching and I love doing it, but also I'm always evolving my material with new research. So to me, it's always fun to have an audience have such a refreshing experience, and new insights. Yeah. And I will say constantly throughout my speeches, have you heard this before? Has anyone said this? Have you read this anywhere? And they're always like shaking their heads like, no, this is the first time. And I like that because as a professor, why teach something somebody already knows? I'd rather just have epiphanies in my classroom.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it sounds like you've gone against the status quo thinking around management and leadership development to do things differently as well.
Yeah, I've been kicked out of a lot of consulting groups, and they don't like me there.
And so the influences in your life, who's been an influence on, the development of your mindset and the way that you think?
I think it's been early on. I think it were the teachers that helped me understand just the basic sciences, so that you could have an analytical mindset. In other words, physics was a fabulous area to explore, and mathematics. And so even though I was doing things that seemed to be totally unrelated, from working on nuclear missile guidance systems to, automating the Harvard MIT biomedical lab, it all taught me how to think in critical, analytical, exploratory ways.
Right.
And so I think in terms of a mindset, if you have that kind of mindset, you can discover things that other people may not even think of asking questions about. And so for me, that's helped me a lot, that background.
That's a great explanation. And to develop your mindset, are there any practical tips that you use day to day to keep your mindset in check and in the right place?
Yes, to always remind myself I could be wrong in my mindset.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's I might got the right mindset right now. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it was interesting. The samurai research, their first chapter on death, I thought was somewhat provocative because there wasn't a lot of management training programs on how to die properly.
Yeah.
But I began to realize, and then neurologically at Johns Hopkins, I was able to get some brain data on this, that death helps free you from the ego, and it allows you to be open to new things. So in a sense, it's almost like dying every day. In other words, what has to die inside yourself to allow you to move forward?
Right.
And so I don't, I'm not 100% perfect at this, but I do try to remind myself, like, maybe that mindset got me here, but what has to die in that mindset to get me to the next level?
That's really interesting advice. Some of the research that I've been doing more recently and looking at some of the leadership models has been around, egoless leadership. So, that's a great way of putting it. So from talking about mindset and obviously being a writer and you've written a number of books. Is there another book on the way, or are you focused on the samurai one at the moment, the Code of the CEO?
No, actually, I have several books that, it's been so busy. A couple have been written several years or more ago, and one was on entrepreneurship. Okay. And so I'm hoping to have that kind of finalized and released over the next year. The other one was a spin-off from the genetic work we were doing in mammalian mating behaviors, and New York wouldn't publish it because it was too controversial and politically incorrect. But I ended up doing a subtopic called sex and leadership. And so I'm hoping to have that released. And it really talks about how we evolved as a species, and then at what point, when we became gender-based as a life form, how did genders affect how we interacted with each other, and why do we lead the way we do? Because we lead sometimes differently than other organisms. And so it's a fascinating book. I use a lot of work from Dr. David Buss, who's the pioneer of evolutionary psychology. In fact, I was talking to him the other day, like we were looking at maybe doing a book together. So I think this area of understanding how our work as a species and becoming sex-based in terms of gender-based affected how we lead now. Wow. And how we work. So it's a fascinating study. And so it's another book. But more recently, I was on the phone with, and this is funny because I don't know if you're familiar with Simon Sinek. Start with why stuff. Yes. So what was interesting about he turned me on to this guy, Dov Barron, who's a fabulous leadership speaker and researcher in his own right. But Simon Sinek was coached by a guy named Mark Levy, and Mark Levy's my coach. So Simon and I have the same coach, and was Mark Levy that turned me on to Dov. So what happened in my last conversation with Dov? Not as long-winded answer to your question, but I just want to acknowledge the sources of the people that help me become greater, and it's always cool to do that. As I think he said that you really are. He says your brand should be the leadership myth buster, and you should use that to pull everything together. And it hit me like, oh my God, he's right. Because when I do my speeches and even my articles and my books, I'm pulling out like, this is what you believe to be true. And let me show you why it's not. Wow. You think it's this, but the failure rates, have you gone on to look at the failure rates academically And because management theory fails about 70 to 90% from the 4 million articles published by the research institutes. It's a lot of failure documentation. Yeah. So it's, so for me, it was like, wow, yeah, I'm kind of busting myths.
Yeah.
And when I do it, so I think that's going to be the next book.
Yeah.
And I think our working title is Exposed. I want to put together like 30 things that we believe to be true that aren't, and what to do about it. Yeah, so I'm having a lot of fun with that new project.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. And leading from there, and the fun aspect of what you do, have you had any? And I'm sure you've had many fun adventures, or is there a fun story that you can share with the listeners?
Oh yeah, we've been. I always get delighted in visiting different like remote tribal regions, and I'm going to find something that could be colorful but not too politically incorrect. I think one of the fun things that I did was having two Soviet bloc guards laugh when we asked them for directions at the time when the Soviet bloc was collapsing, and we were totally lost because they had moved Checkpoint Charlie, and I had snuck into the Soviet bloc. I had this rental car that I rented in Austria. And it was a long story. The whole block's collapsing. I wanted to study a civilization's collapse. And you can't do that every day because there's not that many collapsing every day.
Yeah.
But I thought this would be epic. And I wanted to get behind the scenes. And at the time, they should have arrested me as a capitalist spy. There's no off the transit route. They were there with their weapons and they just looked at each other and just bust out laughing. It was like the world had changed so much. And maybe they still talk about it today, but we finally found a new Checkpoint Charlie, which was moved from a dark alley to 4 or 5 lane entrance. And I think there was a U.S. soldier was like, how did you get here? I was like the first person through Checkpoint Charlie. And I had such a fun time. Yeah, that was cool. So I always get stuck in these weird situations.
I think you got lucky there. I think if they caught me, they would have thrown me away. There'd be no key to be seen again.
I'd be doing a podcast from Siberia.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, just to conclude, you've shared some insights into the work that you do and the books that you've written and that you're about to write, and obviously you're a speaker and you work with CEOs, right across the globe. So what would be the key advice that you'd give to the listeners?
I think to continually challenge what we think is true, to understand something that could take us farther. When I look at leadership and CEOs, the most profound journeys are those that are willing to question and give up on what they thought was true and might have been.
Yeah.
To seek something next, to continue to question, because I think that's how leadership evolves. It doesn't evolve by worshiping the status quo and not changing. And that's the danger, I think, today is, and my one of my colleagues was fabulous in helping me understand that, our legacy beliefs cause us to react to problems in life with legacy solutions, and that doesn't serve us.
Right. Brilliant advice. That's great. I do like that. I'm just taking that in. Brilliant. Well, Don, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been brilliant having you on. So many thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.